They called him primitive when he walked into the council chamber. No armor, no weapon, just a plain black coat, worn boots, and a quiet glare that silenced the room louder than any war cry. Every delegate from the Galactic Empire was there. Towering reptilian strategists, violet-skinned tacticians with neural uplinks fused to their skulls, synthetic minds floating in hoverpods, gathered to hear the human representatives speak or beg. That's what they expected. Another backwater race crawling for trade agreements or amnesty. But what they got was silence. Then 5 words. "We know what you did." The room shifted. The Zarn diplomat tilted its frilled head. "Excuse me." The man, he never gave a name, set down a small black cube on the marble floor. Nothing special. Looked like a toy. Then it lit up. Every power core in the building flickered. Every surveillance drone dropped from the ceiling and the air changed. Not like temperature, like reality itself. Took a step back. "What is that device?" Someone barked from the Wera sector. He didn't answer, just looked at them. "This isn't a device. It's evidence." Another flick of the cube, and images burst out. Colonies erased, children taken, bodies dissected, human bodies. Projects that had been scrubbed from every server in the known systems. Projects that never should have been possible. You experimented on us. You called us beasts. You thought we were behind, but we were watching, learning, quietly, carefully. The Allori Prime shrieked. "That's classified. How did you weigh?" "We broke your encryption 15 years ago," the man said. "We cracked your best AI in 2 days. We've had access to your data streams, battle plans, and black ops for over a decade." Silence, the kind that suffocates. Then came the tremble. It wasn't fear. Not yet. It was something worse. Confusion. Because the truth didn't fit their belief. Humanity was supposed to be inferior. That was fact. That was order. And this man, he was flipping the table. "You can't even explain how that cube works, can you?" he said, his voice like gravel. "You can't scan it. You can't replicate it. Your laws of physics reject it." He leaned forward, eyes burning with something old. "That's not advanced. That's impossible. That's what you don't understand." The Clarens, who lived and died by quantum logic, burst into a frenzy of static-laced protests. Violation of known science. "This is heresy." He didn't flinch. "Number this is evolution. You've grown soft, bound by your models, your rules, your tech ceilings. You forgot how to adapt. We didn't." The cube pulsed once. The building's power grid flatlined. In every system linked to the chamber across dozens of worlds, ships blinked out of warp. AIS collapsed into silence, and long-hidden truths bled into the networks like spilled blood. And that's when panic hit. This wasn't a declaration of war. It was a reveal. A reveal that everything they thought about Earth was wrong. The Galactic Empire wasn't just behind. It was obsolete. He turned his back on them and walked away. No threats, no negotiation. And as the guards scrambled to respond, their weapons locked, their commands failed. The man vanished. No transport signature, no warp trail, just gone. And the cube stayed softly humming, waiting. It had been 48 hours since the cube was activated in the Grand Council chamber, and already 17 systems had gone dark. Not from attack, not from warships or nukes or some fancy virus. From fear. Systems shut down preemptively. Entire sectors gone silent just to avoid contact. The implications of what that single human had shown, demonstrated, rippled through the galaxy like shockwaves through space dust. Governments that prided themselves on logic, control, and calculation were now chasing shadows, because the question wasn't what the cube was. It was how humanity had made it, and why the hell no one saw it coming. Grand Marshal Thix of the Allorian Armada stood aboard his personal dreadnought, Vindicator, staring at a frozen feed of the cube's energy signature. He'd been reviewing it for the 8th time that cycle, and he still couldn't make sense of it. "It violates gravitational logic," his science officer muttered. "No, it mocks it," Thix snapped. "It bends space without displacing it. It alters energy fields without consuming power. What kind of creature builds something that doesn't just break the rules, but doesn't need them anymore?" The officer didn't respond. How could he? Every high-tech empire across the stars had the same conclusion. The cube was doing things even their best minds couldn't describe. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a tool. It was a message. You're not in charge anymore. And Theix knew damn well what that meant. They'd underestimated the humans again. His talent hand hovered above the console. He had a decision to make, and he knew it wasn't just political. It was survival. Back on Earth, somewhere far beneath the Rocky Mountains, the man from the chamber walked into a steel room, lit by nothing but soft blue glows, pulsing from the walls. A dozen others stood waiting. Men, women, old and young. Scientists, soldiers, engineers, all quiet, all focused. At the center, another cube, not identical. This one was blacker, hungrier. Its edges seemed to shift, like it was half inside this reality, and half somewhere else entirely. It worked, he said, taking off his coat. A woman with cybernetic eyes nodded. More than we expected. The Empire's already freezing trade lanes. Communications are folding into lockdown. They're scared. They should be. Another man approached, grizzled, scarred, with hands that looked like they hadn't been clean in years. How long till they realize we didn't just make that tech? They won't, the first man replied, because they can't. Silence settled again. This room wasn't one of celebration. There was no cheering, no self-congratulations, because what they'd built, what they'd unleashed, wasn't just human-made, it was post-human. The cube wasn't created in the traditional sense. It was grown, cultivated through processes that involved synthetic consciousness, experimental time loops, and theoretical materials that didn't even have names yet. It was as much alive as it was a machine, and it communicated in math. Humans still barely understood. But that was the point. Humanity had stopped trying to play catch-up with the rest of the galaxy. They'd started playing a different game entirely. Meanwhile, chaos gripped the Galactic Empire's outer colonies. Entire fleets began pulling back. Surveillance stations left unmanned. Defense grids powered down out of sheer uncertainty. Every alien race from the cold-blooded Clarons to the silicon-boned Tavari was holding their breath. Who were the humans really? Because up until now they were background noise, barely spacefaring, constantly at war with each other, obsessed with primitive things like money and politics and pride. They were noisy, irrational, and didn't even live long. But now they'd shown something that couldn't be ignored. A Zari warlord summed it up best, in a broadcast that went viral across 7 star systems. We built our empire on control. They built something that rejects control. If that's human thinking, we are extinct. We just haven't realized it yet. Theix had enough. We're not waiting, he barked to his crew. What are your orders, Grand Marshal? His second asked. We're going to Earth. A gasp spread across the bridge. Not metaphorical. Actual shock. You want to invade? Someone asked, barely keeping his voice steady. Number not yet. We make contact. We demand answers. And if they won't give them, he paused, letting the weight of his words crush the air. Then we make them bleed. The Vindicator turned, its colossal frame igniting its dark matter engines. Within minutes, it warped from Empire space en route to Sol's system, to Earth, to the unknown. But Earth wasn't caught off guard. Humanity had planned for this. The moment the Vindicator warped into Sue's edge, alarms blared in Black Ops stations hidden on Mars, Europa, and even deep beneath the oceans of Earth. But there were no panicked responses, no scrambling. Instead, a single message was sent to the council below the Rockies. They're here. The man who'd stood in the chamber didn't flinch. Let them land. You sure? The grizzled engineer asked. They're bringing their elite full armament. Could glass a continent if they wanted. They won't. He looked toward the blacker cube, pulsing now in sync with the orbiting ship's arrival, because they still think they're in control. On board the Vindicator, as Earth's moon loomed in the distance, Theix stood tall on the observation deck. Any resistance? He asked. None. Passive satellites only. Some are old Earth tech, 20 years outdated. No orbital fleets detected. Theix narrowed his eyes. That didn't sit right. Land in their capital zone. Deploy escorts, but no weapons drawn. I want to speak with their leadership directly. As the ship descended, cutting through the atmosphere with precision that left a thunderclap in its wake. Humans on the ground barely looked up. Some recorded the landing. Some ignored it completely. No scrambling jets, no mobilized troops, just silence. It unnerved the crew more than open hostility would have. The diplomatic pod touched down in what used to be Washington, D.C., now a heavily restored urban complex simply called the core. No national borders, just zones. Zones of humanity that worked like a single mind now. Thix stepped onto the ground. 4 elite guards followed, scanning every inch of the terrain. But nothing came. No troops, no weapons. Just one man standing in the open, arms crossed. That same worn coat, boots dusty from ground he never bowed on. "You again," Thix muttered. The man nodded once. "Welcome to Earth." They didn't waste time. "What is the cube?" The man raised an eyebrow. "Which one?" The human gave a soft exhale like a teacher talking to a student who still didn't get it. "It's a prototype." That word hit harder than any missile. "Prototype?" They barked. "That wasn't your finished product?" "No." The silence that followed could crush planets. "I want answers," Thix said. "Now or we burn this city to the ground." The man didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped closer. "You're not asking for answers," he said. "You're demanding reassurance. You want to believe we're still something you can understand, something you can manage." He paused. "But you can't." Behind him, on a nearby tower, the air shimmered, and the second cube appeared. It hovered in place, larger than the first. Then its shape shifted, edges folding, dimensions twisting, until it looked like a collapsing star wrapped in shadow. "Fire if you want," the man said, turning his back again. "See what happens." They didn't move. His soldiers didn't either, because they all felt it. That second cube, it wasn't technology. It was a verdict in the Vindicator's command deck. Warning lights began flashing. "Sir, we've lost connection to orbiting systems. Our engines aren't responding." "What do you mean?" "I mean we're stuck here." Back on the ground, the cube pulsed once, and every weapon the guards carried disassembled. Not exploded, not jammed. They simply unraveled metal circuit crystal into dust right in their hands. Thyrix stared at his own hand, shaking now for the first time in his long, brutal military career. He felt powerless. The man stepped close again, face grim. "You came here to understand how we did it," he said. "You missed the point. We didn't do it to you. We did it without you." And then he whispered the last line like it was prophecy. "And we don't need you anymore." For the first time in over 1,000 years, the Galactic Empire couldn't move. Literally, the Vindicator, their most powerful dreadnought, hovered uselessly in Earth's upper atmosphere. No engines, no shields, no warp drive, just a shell of expensive metal and pride, helpless against a force none of them could explain. And on the surface, Grand Marshal Thix stood stunned, watching as the second cube, larger, darker, alive in a way nothing synthetic should be, floated lazily in the sky. It didn't spin. It pulsed with purpose, with awareness. It watched. "You've crippled our ship," Thix finally managed, his voice quieter. "Now, this is an act of war." The man in the coat said nothing for a long moment. "Then there's no war to fight. You've already lost. You just haven't accepted it yet." One of the Elorian guards, younger, twitchier, tried to lift a pulse rifle, forgetting what had just happened to their tech. The weapon hummed, then melted in his grip. He screamed and fell to his knees, the metal fusing with his armor. "Don't," the man said calmly. "The cube doesn't like fear." His eyes narrowed. "It's sentient." "No," the human said. "Worse, it's intuitive." He stepped forward slowly, boots crunching over the gravel of Earth's former capital. "We spent generations catching up to you, watching, decoding, mimicking. We thought we were behind, but somewhere along the way, we stopped trying to be like you and started becoming something else." The cube overhead flashed again. Back on the Vindicator, emergency systems sparked to life, but nothing worked. The ship's AI screamed error codes in dozens of dialects. Power surged and collapsed in loops. Core systems rewrote themselves in real time, Garbage data being replaced with symbols and code strings no one on the crew could recognize. One tech officer threw his headset off. This isn't a hack. It's a rewrite. It's changing our language structure at the base code level. What does that even mean? The captain barked. It means it's treating our ship like it's primitive, like it's updating a toy. Down below, Theix was beginning to understand. You didn't invent that cube, he said. You unlocked it. The man nodded. We stopped trying to build things with bolts and fuel and predictable outcomes. We started listening to what? The man tapped the side of his head. Patterns, waves, possibilities. Reality has seams. We just learned how to pull on the threads. Impossible. You keep saying that word. He felt the dread forming deep in his chest. Not the dread of defeat, but the dread of irrelevance. He had commanded fleets that reduced planets to dust. He had shattered alliances with a single word. He had faced beasts, machines, revolts. But this wasn't war. This was being left behind. What do you want from us? He asked finally. And though he hated how small his voice sounded, he needed to know. The man didn't answer at first. He turned and walked toward a long-forgotten building. It had been a monument once, a place where ideas lived, cracked now, but still standing. He gestured for Theix to follow. Inside, old screens flickered to life. No wires, no power source, just proximity to the cube, now floating quietly at the doorway. The screens showed footage, images from across the galaxy, slavery camps, genetic harvests, human children in cages, strapped to alien machines, Earth colonies cleansed during population restructuring campaigns. It was footage Theix had seen before. Authorized, covered up, denied. He said nothing. You want to talk about peace? The man said, eyes never leaving the screen. You want trade agreements? Mutual defense pacts? He turned sharply, fire behind his eyes. You gave us nothing but chains. You called us irrational, violent, beneath progress. And now you want us to forgive that. Thyrix's jaw clenched. Those were past administrations, separate systems, autonomous factions. The man snapped his fingers. The footage shifted. Every face in every command structure responsible for those camps. Every name, every order, every file. You don't get to wash the blood off just because the knife changed hands. He walked closer now, voice dropping. You didn't just hurt us. You humiliated us, mocked us, took what we had, labeled it primitive, and told us to be grateful you didn't take more. Thyrix had no reply, because it was true. Back on the Vindicator, something else was happening. A door had opened, not physically, not mechanically, but somewhere inside the ship's architecture. A chamber no one remembered ever existing had appeared. No entry logs, no schematics, just there. 3 engineers were sent to investigate. Only one came back. He couldn't speak. He just stood there, eyes wide, blood leaking from his nose. The captain demanded answers. All he said was, "It's not a room, it's a mirror." And it showed me what we could have been. They locked him up after that. He kept screaming one phrase over and over. They didn't evolve past us. They evolved past everything on Earth. The man led Theix out of the monument. You're not the first civilization to rise, he said, but you might be the last to fall. Theix stopped walking. So that's it? You'll wipe us out? Destroy the Empire? The man sighed. See, that's your problem. You think it's about destruction. You think we want revenge. He pointed toward the sky where the cube was now shrinking, folding into itself until it vanished completely. Number, we don't need to destroy you. He leaned in closer. We're going to leave you behind. The blinked. Leave us behind, the man repeated. We're not looking to rule your empire. We're not interested in your treaties. We're leaving this galaxy. You can keep it along with your fear, your politics, your obsolete gods. He turned and walked toward the edge of the city, toward a transport unlike anything had ever seen, silent, hovering above the ground, as if space itself was holding it up. And when we're gone, the man added without looking back, you'll look up at the stars and realize what terrifies you most. He stopped. Is that we're not angry. We're just done with you. And then he boarded the ship. The vehicle pulsed once and vanished. No flash, no trail, just gone. That night, across the Empire, something terrifying began happening. Ships in orbit above human territories started shutting down. Not destroyed, just paused. The technology still worked. The lights stayed on. But the crews, they stopped receiving commands. They stopped getting responses. Communication collapsed. The ships drifted aimlessly in space, as if waiting for a purpose that no longer existed. One by one, empires tried to respond. One by one, they failed. Because Earth wasn't fighting a war. Earth was turning off the game. They had discovered something deeper than technology. They had discovered dominance without destruction. A war that didn't require blood. A victory that came not from winning, but from evolving past the need to fight at all. And the Galactic Empire, it was stuck, screaming into the void of its own irrelevance. They called it the Hollowing. Not officially. Not in the sterile reports filed away in the crumbling archives of the Imperial Core, but among the frightened technicians, the scattered warlords, and the desperate rulers. It was the only name that made sense, because one by one, systems were going quiet. Not destroyed, not invaded, just empty. Planetary AIS would go blank. Navigation satellites lost their ability to lock on. Weapons stations failed to respond. And worse, when scouts were sent to investigate, they found colonies still there, still intact, but every living thing gone. No signs of struggle, no heat signatures, just silence. And always, always, a faint residual echo, a pulse in the electromagnetic spectrum no one could trace. It wasn't a signal, it wasn't a weapon, it was a reminder. Humanity had passed through and taken everything with them. Admiral Fio of the Tavari Dominion didn't believe in ghosts. He'd spent 42 cycles serving in the Empire's outer rim, crushing pirate outposts, quelling planetary revolts, and navigating plasma storms that would cook most species in their ships. He was ruthless, strategic, and feared. But now he was scared. He stood aboard the Shatterm, orbiting what used to be Colony 5X91, a thriving Tavari outpost, 200,000 strong, mining, farming, terraforming, self-sustaining, gone. Every building still stood, power cores functional, air systems running, but not a single heartbeat. "Scan again," barked, his voice shaking despite himself. His exo turned slowly. "Admiral, we've scanned 30 times. Life signs, 0. No distress calls, no bodies, no signs of transport, none. It's as if they just vanished." The Admiral's claws tapped against the control panel. "Is this a human attack?" "I don't think it's an attack at all." The exo turned the screen toward him. A waveform danced lazily across it. Some kind of energy residue traced to no known source. "It's not harmful," she whispered. Just there, like the ghost of a thought, stared at it. A tremble crawled up his spine. Back on Earth, what was left of it, there was no celebration, no declaration of victory, no cheers. Because what they'd done wasn't a conquest. It was an exodus. Humanity was no longer unified by flags or governments, not even by ideology. What united them now was a single goal: departure. They had outgrown the galaxy. The old man, some still called him that, even if he looked 40, stood alone in the last chamber of what used to be the Pentagon. Walls stripped of insignias, floors gleaming with pulse light drawn from a new kind of energy, the kind that didn't even have a name yet. The black cube sat in the center. It no longer pulsed. It breathed. The woman with the synthetic eyes entered, a datapad in hand. "We're ready," she said. "The ascension gates have been stabilized. All remaining colonies have returned. No one's been left behind. And the Empire, they're collapsing inwards. The clearance just tried to invade Sector 9. Their fleet engines failed mid-jump. They don't understand why." He nodded. "They wouldn't. They couldn't because what Earth had built wasn't a weapon or a machine. It was a departure protocol, a sequence encoded not in code or light, but reality itself. It bent causality, folded probability, erased presence. Humanity was erasing itself from the board without firing a single shot, and they left nothing usable behind. No scraps, no reverse engineerable tech, nothing to steal, only the whisper of something impossible. But not everyone in the Empire was ready to fade. In a scorched moon orbiting the dying gas giant, Ralphish, A council of desperate warlords gathered. 17 species, hundreds of cycles of hatred between them, but united by fear now. Fear of Earth, fear of what they couldn't explain, fear of the hollowing. The Warren general, plated in gold armor chipped from 3 failed campaigns, slammed his fist on the war table. We cannot just let them leave. We must act, strike, take what they've made before it's too late. And what would you strike with? Hissed the Alori technocrat. Every time we approach one of their installations, our systems collapse. Our weapons deactivate. Even our thoughts start to feel disassembled. They've tampered with reality itself, another muttered. So, we let them go, spat a younger warlord. We just bow. Let them take their God's-damned miracle tech and vanish into some other dimension. The table went silent. Then a voice, cold, tired, resolute. We let them go, said the Tavari. The others turned. You'd surrender? No, he said. I'd survive. He leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. We spent centuries mocking them, enslaving them. They never forgot. But worse, they never stopped learning. And now, he gestured towards the dark sky above the moon's dome. They've seen something we never will. They aren't running away. They're moving on. And anyone who tries to follow is Kai. He let the silence finish it. Back on Earth, the old man stood before the largest cube yet, the Exodus core. It didn't hum. It didn't flash. It was silent. And every human that remained, scientists, builders, soldiers, children, stood around it in total stillness. No speeches, no goodbyes. They were leaving not just physically. They were severing all attachments. No trails, no fingerprints. They would become legend. The man placed a single item at the foot of the cube, a small brass key, not symbolic, real, old, from a door that no longer existed. He didn't say anything, didn't explain, because what came next wasn't for the galaxy to witness. And then the cube pulsed once, and Earth was gone. Not exploded, not warped, gone, replaced by a shadow, a blank spot in space that sensors skipped, that minds refused to register, like it had never been there. And in its place, nothing. Because that's what the Empire had earned. The Empire began to collapse within a cycle, not from attacks, from within. The Tavari mining fleets lost track of navigation charts. They no longer understood space the same way. The clear and thoughtcasters suffered mass psychosis, screaming about folded futures. Warren armadas tried to activate worm gates, only to vanish mid-jump, never arriving, never dying, just lost in transition. Some said Earth had altered time itself. Others believed the humans had left traps, codes built into the laws of motion, hiding in physics equations that detonated when read. A few even whispered that humanity had reached the edge of godhood and simply chose not to become gods. The most terrifying theory, they had no gods left to answer to. 100 years later, a lost salvage ship passed through what used to be Sol. Nothing remained, just a ripple in space and a strange gravitational echo that seemed to loop endlessly. One of the junior crew, young, cocky, loud, found a floating object near the edge of the system. No energy, no pulse, just a brass key. When he picked it up, he felt a sudden surge of emotion he couldn't name, like sadness for something he never knew he lost. Like standing at a grave you don't remember digging. They logged the key, tagged it, moved on. But that crew, they never made it home. No wreckage was found, only a final message logged in the captain's file. They didn't destroy us, they just left. And the worst part is, they were right to. In the ashes of the dying empire, there were still whispers, scattered signals, rogue beacons, messages coded in dead dialects. They spoke of a project, a secret buried so deep even the high consoles of the Galactic core feared to touch it. Project Revenant. It had been designed long ago, at the height of the Empire's dominance, back when humans were still considered feral colonists, suitable only for mining labor and ground wars. Revenant was a contingency, a response to an impossible scenario. If the Empire is ever made obsolete, unleash this. It wasn't a weapon in the conventional sense. No fleets, no bombs, no AI-controlled supervirus. It was something older, It was a God-killer protocol, a code that preyed on thought, on self-awareness, on presence itself. And now, after Earth had vanished into silence, and the rest of the Empire crumbled under its own hollow bones, there was one race still arrogant enough to activate it, the Very Ascendancy. Valari Prime was a cold glass world, built in orbit around a burnt-out neutron star. The race that lived there were barely biological anymore. Pale, elongated figures housed in plated gold exoforms. Their neural architecture stretched beyond comprehension. They didn't speak as much as harmonize. Their thoughts resonated in synchronized pulses through atmosphere-tuned conduits. For centuries, they considered themselves the stewards of reason, the final keepers of advanced logic, the last architects of control. The disappearance of Earth, an insult they couldn't tolerate. They left to escape justice, spoke one of their leaders through the council web, her voice more code than breath. No, replied another, they left because they feared what they had become. It is weakness disguised as transcendence. The galaxy listens to ghosts now, the third added bitterly. Let us remind it who commands the living. And so they lit the core flame beneath the black vaults of Vault 13. Project Revenant woke. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't alive. It was a concept made hostile. A sentient anomaly. A logic paradox. So dense it couldn't be stored on physical servers. It could only exist in distributed fragments, housed inside the minds of semi-synthetic Valari volunteers, each one carrying a piece of the code. When assembled, Revenant would rebuild itself, not to destroy humanity, but to recall it, to pull back what had left, to make it knowable again. The Valari didn't want peace. They didn't want surrender. They wanted dominance over comprehension. They wanted the human impossibility to be cracked open, like a failed experiment, and repurposed into data they could harvest. And so, they activated the pulse across the edges of the forgotten zones where Earth's shadow still lingered. Space bent, a ripple spread, carried not by energy, but by memory. A realignment of logic strings so subtle that even machines couldn't register the change. But something else did. Back in what remained of the Sol system, a cold void wrapped in non-space. A small thread shimmered, barely visible, like the tail of a comet too ancient to be remembered. Inside that thread, a part of the black cube still slept, and when the revenant pulse reached it, it opened its eyes. The Very believed themselves victorious. In their observation chamber, dozens of hollow-faced thinkers stood silently as their instruments confirmed the first wave had triggered a resonant distortion field in the forgotten system. The thread is responding, one said. We are pulling the anomaly back into reality. Their retreat was temporary, said another. We will bring them home, not as gods, as data. They didn't notice the lights dimming. They didn't feel the floor vibrating, barely perceptible, like the heartbeat of something deep beneath their logic towers. They didn't see the glass panels begin to fog until it was too late. The black cube didn't just respond, it countered, but not by attacking. It remembered them. It projected the memory back. Every moment of subjugation, every scream of a child dissected on a table, every planet restructured into a prison. It didn't kill the very thinkers in that chamber. It just made them see, and that was enough. One by one, the most rational minds in the galaxy collapsed into fetal positions, screaming for gods they no longer believed in. Some wept. Some clawed out their own neural implants. A few simply whispered, "It knows." And then their instruments melted. No heat, no force, just ceased to recognize their own existence. Revenant hadn't failed. It had succeeded, and in doing so, had triggered its own execution. Back in the void where Earth used to be, a shape emerged. Not a ship, not a planet, something else. A convergence of human design, black cube logic, and the impossible architectures of post-causality. It pulsed once. The ripple crossed the stars, and the galaxy remembered fear. Not war, not pain, irrelevance. The few systems still operational went dark in weeks. Not because of violence, because their very meaning was being removed. Their coordinates changed, their math corrupted, their place in the fabric of existence rewritten. What Project Revenant had tried to recall, humanity now decided to erase fully. Not with fire, with forgetting. You don't control a god by dragging it back. You die because it remembered why it left you behind in the first place. On the edge of the known starfields, a single message was picked up by an ancient Terran satellite, one of the last bits of tech still orbiting aimlessly. It wasn't a broadcast. It was a whisper embedded into the wave itself. We do not punish. We do not conquer. We do not explain. We forget, and so shall you. Project Revenant was never spoken of again. The Valari gone. Not vaporized, not destroyed. Gone. Their planet never existed. Their race never logged. Even the words Valari Ascendancy were met with confused stares across the stars. Records showed nothing. As if the Empire never had them. As if they never mattered. Because they didn't. Because humanity had decided they wouldn't. Somewhere far beyond the edge of the known galaxy, the cube rests. Not watching. Not waiting. Just existing. A monument, not to what humanity destroyed, but what they chose not to become. His name was Ka, son of no bloodline, born on the prison world of Ulrich 9. He was not a warlord or a scientist or a diplomat. He had no species-aligned credentials, no royal blood, no implanted command nodes, but what he had was hate, and that was enough. When the Galactic Empire fell, Ka had been nothing. A nameless ex-miner turned scavenger left to pick the bones of old warships and forgotten settlements. He watched empires die, not from missiles or bioplagues, but from silence, from vanishing records, from stars being skipped over on star charts that once marked them as capitals. He had watched it all, and he remembered. He remembered Earth. He remembered the day he heard the story, secondhand, maybe false, maybe fantasy, of a man in a black coat walking into the Galactic Council and bringing the universe to its knees without raising a single weapon. Everyone else forgot. Their minds unraveled. Their systems failed. But Ka, he carved it into his skin, literally across his arms, down his spine, over his chest. Coordinates, names, phrases, the shape of the cube burned into flesh with a repurposed plasma scalpel. You may forget, he muttered daily, sharpening salvaged metal into crude blades. But I won't, not ever. And now he stood before the last remaining vessel of its kind, the Thorn Wakeake. It wasn't a warship. It was a long-range salvage transport, powered by semi-sentient crystal arrays and an outdated jump core. Every system inside it had been illegally modified, ripped from dead ships, spliced together with black market AI routines, and held together by Ka's rage. The Thornwake was a monster. Ugly, broken, borderline suicidal, just like its pilot, and its target, the void where Earth had been. The old coordinates had been wiped from every active system, maps rooted, memory sectors corrupted. But Ka didn't rely on systems. He had the scars. And so, guided by blood and fury, the Thornwake tore through the dead edges of the galaxy, moving toward the black hole of history where humanity had vanished. No warnings, no signals, just a goal. He wasn't going to beg for survival. He wasn't going to reclaim the Empire. He was going to make them remember him. It took 17 jumps. Fuel nearly ran dry. His nav core fried itself on the 15th transition, forcing Ka to blind jump the last two sequences, using nothing but stellar drift and gravitational echoes. And then silence. No stars, no light. Just a black void that sensors refused to read. A pocket of nothing. But Ka saw it. He stepped to the forward glass, blood leaking from his nostrils after the last jump, bones aching. There it was, the scar where Earth had been, still invisible to the galaxy, but not to him. I see you, he whispered, teeth clenched. And then he did the unthinkable. He broadcasted. He'd cobbled the transmission rig together from an old distress beacon and the consciousness core of a long-dead Zari linguistics drone. It didn't send messages in known languages. It sent raw cognition, emotion packaged in quantum spike waves. Impossible to intercept. Impossible to decode unless you were human. Unless you had built the cube. Ka stood before the beacon, chest bare, scars pulsing, and he screamed. He screamed hate into the void. He poured decades of loss, of suffering, of being erased into one long scream that fractured the rig's housing. He screamed until blood coated the inside of his mouth. Then he said the only words that mattered. "I did not forget you, so now you will not forget me." At first, nothing happened. The thorn wake drifted. Ka collapsed against the bulkhead, throat torn, hands shaking. But then the lights dimmed. One by one, his ship's systems began to shut down, not fail. Shut down politely, as if being told, "You no longer belong here." But Ka only smiled. A savage, broken smile. "I knew you'd answer." Outside the ship, reality folded. It didn't tear. It didn't crack. It curved inward, like the universe was being turned inside out to allow something to arrive. And then it appeared. Not a cube, not a vessel, just a presence. A ripple in the glass of space, in the air inside the ship, in the back of Kay's skull. It wasn't violent. It wasn't loud. It was aware. Kay stumbled toward the center of the deck, shirtless, gasping, chest rising and falling with exertion and euphoria. "I'm here," he said. "Come on, show me. Show me your truth, or kill me." The presence didn't move because it didn't have to. It projected not light, not images, memory. Collins was no longer on his ship. He stood on Earth. Not the Earth he'd read about. Not the Earth that had burned under colonial wars, but the Earth after. Sky's endless cities alive with light and gravity that bent around glass towers. Children laughing in languages not spoken, only felt. Machines tending fields of thought. And in the center of it all, a man in a black coat, standing before the last cube. Kata approached him, or thought he did. "Space was strange here. You left," Ka whispered. "You erased everything. You made us nothing." The man didn't turn. "You made yourselves nothing," he replied softly. "We survived," Ka shouted. "We remembered. And what did memory give you? Truth? No. The man said it gave you pain. You didn't remember us to understand. You remembered us to hate." Kaza's fists clenched. "You had no right to leave us behind." "We didn't leave you behind," the man said, finally turning. His face was unremarkable. Not cruel, not smug, just tired. "We gave you the galaxy. You ruined it. We made something better. You ran. We evolved. You think that makes you better than us?" "No," the man said. "It makes us gone." The projection faded. Ka fell to his knees, shaking, broken. "You have to remember me," he whispered, tears spilling freely. "If you don't, then none of this mattered." The presence pulsed, and for a moment, he felt it. Recognition. He mattered. And then he didn't. When the scavenger ship Sister's Grief found the Thornwake drifting weeks later, it was empty. No cairn, no logs, no damage. Just a single sentence scratched into the inside of the cockpit in dried blood. "They remembered me, and chose to forget again." In the depths between galaxies, beyond where dark energy bends the fabric of existence into forgotten folds, something ancient awoke. It had no name, not because it had none, but because no civilization had survived long enough to give it one. It was not born. It did not evolve. It simply was a conscious remnant from the first stirrings of the universe. A being of curiosity, not morality. A watcher of timelines. A feeder of possibility. And it had seen the humans. For eons, this presence drifted silently across the cosmos, observing the rise and fall of trillions. It saw empires blaze in golden fire, collapse in black dust, and scream into extinction before they ever fully understood what they were. But humanity was different, not because of power, not because of intellect, but because humanity had left. And worse, they'd taken their meaning with them. For something that had watched the galaxy's logic hold firm for billions of years, the departure of Earth was not an event. It was an anomaly, an infection in the probability field. It had tracked Earth's trajectory, monitored their development, measured their chaos, the violence, the ambition, the hunger for more. That was normal, but then silence, and the galaxy itself had shifted. Space where Earth once existed now bent light differently. Gravity moved like liquid. Even the laws of cause and effect had become uncertain in that region, and that should not be possible. Even this ancient thing had limits to what it could understand, and so it did something it had not done since before stars burned. It moved inside what used to be called the Lemma sector, in a ruined observatory orbiting a long-dead sun. A forgotten construct blinked online. Not because someone activated it, but because something was nearby. Something with presence powerful enough to make sensors shiver in fear. The construct was old. Older than any empire records. Built by a species that had long since vanished into radiation storms and nuclear rot. But it still worked. Barely. Inside, a single interface activated, and on it a shape appeared. Not a body, not a ship, just a question wrapped in probability hovering on the screen. Where is Earth? The observatory. Limited stuttering ran simulations. No data. The question pulsed again. Incorrect. Recalculate. You were watching. You remembered. I don't remember. The AI admitted. The temperature in the chamber dropped. Not physically, existentially. Then your memories must be reconstructed. And suddenly, the AI was no longer alone. It felt like something was crawling into it. The construct screamed, not in noise, but in code. Old memory cores firing. Long-dead power cells burning themselves alive. The AI's logs filled with echoes, coordinates, pulses, quantum anomalies, all from Earth. What came through wasn't light. It was awareness. The ancient presence didn't need language. It didn't ask permission. It simply entered. And then, it began to rebuild, one moment at a time. From the first radio waves Earth ever sent into space. From fragments of long dead-end satellites drifting in low orbits around gas giants. From erased empire backups, deleted transmissions, corrupted black box logs. Piece by piece reconstruction until the ancient presence saw the man in the coat, the cube, the silence, and understood one thing. They did not die. They transcended. The construct exploded. Too small a mind to house such truth. But the presence was no longer asking. It wanted answers. In the edges of the void, where Earth had vanished, space twisted. 1,000 observers across different surviving systems saw it. But only those with nonlinear time vision could process what was happening. To everyone else, it looked like a black tear, a reverse sun, a collapsing probability storm. But to the ancient being, it was a door. It did not open the door. It became the door, and it reached in. But what it found was not Earth. It was a wall, a barrier, not a force or code or energy. A barrier of choice. Humanity had not simply left. They had folded their reality inward, sealing themselves from everything that still relied on understanding. This presence could warp suns, could see gravity breathe, could replay the birth of quasars, but it could not enter. And that for the first time since time began, made it afraid. The presence recoiled, but not in retreat, in thought. It had watched beings rise, watched consciousness birth galaxies, but never had it been denied entry. Never had it faced a wall built not from strength but from will, and it began to consider the unthinkable. Had humanity gone somewhere higher? If so, what did that mean for everything left behind? Had the humans evolved beyond the realm of watchers? Had they seen the strings of existence and simply snipped their own? Were they now beyond time, beyond space, or worse, were they building something? The presence turned back toward the galaxy. It had a new purpose now. Not curiosity, preparation. If humanity had gone ahead, they might one day return, and if they did, what would they bring with them? The presence no longer wanted answers. It wanted defenses. It began to seed its agents, not ships, not machines, but thoughts, ideas, whispers, placed in the minds of newborns in every species still breathing. Paranoia, fear, visions, dreams of a man in a coat who never spoke, but always arrived just before everything fell apart. Some called it prophecy, others madness, but all knew its name, the return. Somewhere deeper still, behind the wall Earth had built, inside the impossible space where humanity now existed, something shifted. A light blinked. A message was received. A child, barely conscious in the new plane, turned to the elders. "They're scared," he said. The oldest one, neither man nor woman, neither machine nor flesh, smiled. "They should be. The moment came without warning. In the silence beyond the void, a light blinked once. Not bright, not loud, just present. And across the entire galaxy, every remaining machine, every functioning server, mind link, beacon, and forgotten scrap of circuitry lit up with a message. It was simple. We have not returned, but we are watching, and you still do not understand. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a call. It was a diagnosis. The ancient presence stirred in response, wrapping itself tighter around the broken edges of the galaxy, like a wound dressing itself in armor. It had spent cycles preparing. It had woven itself into prophecy, planted seeds of fear, built conceptual bunkers within civilizations that still dared to crawl through their own ashes. But this message, it burned, because it confirmed what it feared most. Humanity was not just gone. They had transcended judgment itself, and yet it still hoped. Hope for something as old as creation was dangerous. Hope implied the possibility of contact, a chance to pull them back, to bring meaning to their absence. And so, in desperation, or maybe defiance, it crafted one final act, a construct, a simulation, a trap. In a distant corner of the galaxy, where no sun had burned for 1 billion years, a spacefold anomaly appeared, a perfect replica of Earth. Not the Earth that left, but the Earth the galaxy remembered. Old, scarred, confused, with its skies thick with satellites and smoke, with its oceans boiling under industrial weight, with its people blind to what they might become. The presence created this copy from fragments, echoes stored in time, stolen from quantum residue, hacked from obsolete imperial memories. And at the center it placed a man, worn black coat, dusty boots, emotionless eyes, a memory of humanity's fear. And then the ancient waited for something, anything, to come for the echo. It did not expect what came next. The construct cracked, not physically, existentially. A sound entered the simulation, a vibration that didn't echo in air, but in thought. And then, standing opposite the false human it had made, another figure emerged, younger, calm, real, not an echo, not a memory, a child, human, but not. His skin shimmered with unreal tones. His eyes carried no emotion, only deep ancient clarity. He wore no coat, no armor, just a simple white tunic. And when he spoke, the entire construct quaked. You made this to bait us, but we've already seen it. The ancient presence collapsed into itself, shedding the illusion of the Earth-like world. It tried to hide, to shield itself within conceptual layers of cause and effect, tried to protect its question. But the child didn't pursue it. He simply walked forward, and with every step, time itself rewrote. Stars reformed, planets spun backward, events unraveled. The presence saw itself, its own creation folded in reverse. Entire races it had manipulated, blinked out of sequence. Its agents, its whispers, its fear, they were being erased not as punishment, but as irrelevance. You do not understand us, the child said, because you were always trying to observe a mirror. But we did not rise above you. We let go of what kept us with you. And now you are asking the wrong question. The ancient presence shuddered. For the first time in forever, it whispered a plea. Then tell me, what is the right question? The child looked into the black. His voice dropped to a whisper so soft it rang like a hymn inside the structure of space itself. Why didn't we come back to save you? And the presence wept. Elsewhere, what was left of the galaxy received its second message. No warning, no light, just a sensation, like the moment before thunder, like the knowledge of death in the heartbeat before it happens. And then 3 words spread across every system in every language, even those long dead. You were offered. That was it. No weapon followed, no wave of warships, no plague, no judgment, just a door opening one last time. In the debris belt of the ruined Clear Capital, an abandoned research drone suddenly activated. Its code, once erased by human anti-tech pulses, had somehow returned. Inside it, a shape began to form. A cube, smaller than the others, unstable, but pulsing. A surviving scientist, long thought mad, crawled from her shelter. She wept as she looked upon it, not out of awe, but from some distant ancient guilt. And when she touched it, she heard a single voice. "We did not abandon you. You chose to remain behind." And then it vanished, leaving behind only clarity. Humanity would not return in ships. They would not land with thunder. They would not crown themselves gods or saviors. They had seen all paths, all choices, all outcomes. And they had chosen to watch, not rule, because there was only one truth. You cannot save those who choose ignorance. The ancient presence accepted this at last, and it too let go. It retreated beyond time, not in defeat, but in reflection. What had begun as a question had become something else entirely, a lesson. And in that lesson, it found peace. Somewhere far beyond all known space, in the impossible lattice of post-logic human existence, the old man walked, not in a coat, not in boots, just as he was. He passed by gardens of memory, oceans of probability, cities without form, but filled with meaning. And beside him walked the child. "You think it'll ever change?" the child asked. The man shrugged. "They might evolve or collapse. Maybe both." The child looked up. "Then what do we do?" The man smiled. "We let them live, and when they're ready, they'll know where to find us." And together they walked